Before we get off of the dogs stuff, what is something that is potentially untapped? Because I've heard you talk about the extraordinary abilities that dogs have, and you've leveraged them for different things. You may have your specialty, but is there something out there that's been untapped in terms of something that somebody could do with dogs that hasn't really been leveraged yet?
Um, I mean, there's nothing that comes to mind that hasn't been leveraged yet at all. I would say that there are some detection capabilities that I don't think have been leveraged near to the degree with which they could, on a large enough scale to where it's super impactful. I do need to be careful in how in depth I get into what those are because of the national security implications of if you know some of the techniques that I'm talking about doing, it would give you insight as to how to try to defeat them. So
Understood.
I'll navigate it in this way where I will say that from a detection standpoint, there are, I believe, some brilliantly developed detection capabilities that enable dogs to search, we'll say, like container ships from overseas shipping, an amount or a volume of them that would boggle your mind. I won't get into how that's done, but that's the thing that comes to mind the most, I think. And a secondary one, which is I've actually talked about this on 60 Minutes 15 years ago, but the way to use choke points, funneling, and cordoned off areas in association with I think that it's actually a patented term now, which is vapor wake, which so maybe I shouldn't even use it. Whatever. The gist of it is air scenting for explosive detection, target odor, and then sourcing it with a moving target. So let's say somebody carrying a pressure cooker bomb in a backpack, training dogs to locate somebody who is walking as opposed to it's planted in a trash can by the door or whatever. So a lot of similarities in training wise, obviously, as anybody can imagine that does anything with dogs. There are some differences, but anyway, my point is that specifically as it relates to like the Boston bombing, because when I was on 60 Minutes, it was right after that happened.
Oh, yeah.
So they actually flew me into New York to do an interview on how did this happen? How could we prevent it in the future? And I talk about using that type of air scenting explosive detection training technology, which it's been around a long time. But basically, like, let's say you have, we'll say the Super Bowl since it's coming up. So you use a buffer zone where you cordon off the area around it far enough to where if it's a vehicle borne or a foot, or, human foot traffic borne IED, that it's not close enough to affect the inside of the event. Whatever that safe blast distance is, you've got a cordoned off area around it entirely. Now that's sealed. And you have choke points, however many you can man, going in and out. And everybody that goes in or out has to go through these choke points.
Monitor that ingress, egress, or limit it to where it's
Right.
not so porous, right?
Yeah. And then you're putting these air scenting explosive detection dogs at those locations so that anybody who's carrying anything, they're going to pick up that odor, trail it, locate source, and
Long before they could detonate something. And
right. And that needs to be done several days in advance. So once it's cordoned off, you sweep the entire thing with a team of explosive detection dogs, EOD professionals. Okay, it's cordoned off. We can, with relative certainty, guarantee that the interior of that is safe. Now anybody coming or going is going to be, air scented by explosive detector dogs and what have you.
So is it a numbers game still? It seems like my perception of it is it seems underutilized even for the general intention, whether it's narc dogs or bomb dogs or whatever. It seems like there's just so few of them within each division or department or whatever.
Yeah, it is. I mean, because here's the tough reality is that, if you take law enforcement, which is overwhelmingly going to be the tasked personnel to execute things like that, how often are they doing explosive sweeps? Never. Unless the president's coming in and Secret Service says, hey, we need augment, we're doing a big area.
Special events.
Yeah. So, even big police departments usually, they may have a couple of bomb dogs, but they're going to have, 40 narcotics dogs, because what's happening? Well, they're running dogs on cars all day long and in schools and, meth houses and whatever. And so the bulk of law enforcement from a state, local, and even federal municipality standpoint is primarily narcotics detection. Now, to your question, yes, it's a numbers game. That's a big part of it. I think the solution is having a federally funded mobile task force that does that, that basically you're in charge of doing events. I would kind of T&E it with that, and then say, okay, now let's kick it down to the state level, where each state now has a unit that's what they do, right? So you've got a federal unit that maybe has a handful of independent groups that can go do that for any given event. That writes the playbook, sets the tone and protocols for now.
Or your SOPs and all.
Yeah, and then that trickles down to now every state, depending on state, California, Texas, New York maybe would need more than one unit, but then that way the states have some skin in the game, and that's how you're going to increase your numbers. The nice thing about those dogs too is they don't have to be pointy-eared bite dogs. They can be labs, retrievers, Springer Spaniels, Patterdales, you name it. And so your ability to have those kind of numbers is drastically increased. Whereas if you're saying this dog needs to be a dual purpose bite and detection dog, the number of dogs that have the genetics for that high level of detection work and that high level of apprehension work, those are hard to find. There aren't tens of thousands of those on the planet. There's not even, there's thousands, but not tens of thousands, and those thousands need to be on the street with law enforcement and in special operations and military units and such. So if you're just doing explosive detection, you can use any dog that would pass that selection criteria for a detector dog, which there's lots of those. I've actually pulled dogs out of pounds that have gone and worked for TSA for airport bomb dog security. Not a bunch of them, but a few of them.
That's cool.
So
it's a cool story.
Yeah. So, to me, like they're out there, usually the dog that's a total pain in the ass as a pet and gets surrendered to a shelter because he just has too much drive and his nose is on the ground like an anteater all the time.
Jumping out of the Jeep off the bridge into the ocean.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah.